In this edition of Locked On Capitals, your Washington Capitals fall to the Ottawa Senators. Erik Gustafsson is having a great season, and Martin Feherevary is ready to return to the lineup. We'll talk about all of that and more next on this edition of Locked On Capitals.
You're Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. And when you're on YouTube, make sure and hit that subscribe button, and if you like the videos, give it a thumbs up or leave some comments. It really helps grow the channel. My name is Dan Holman. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about your Washington Capitals as they fall in overtime to the Ottawa Senators. Ultimately, it was a Capitals team that got outworked by the Senators. We'll talk about that later in the show. We will talk about Erik Gustafsson's breakout season. John Karlsson is going to be missing a substantial amount of time, so we need players like Erik Gustafsson and Dmitry Orlov to help fill that gap, and Erik Gustafsson has been doing a really great job on that so far. And then later in the show, we will talk about Martin Feherevary as he plans his return. But just to get it going here, your Washington Capitals do, in fact, fall in overtime. You know, it was one of the games that we were hoping that they were going to be able to keep that win streak going. But ultimately, it was just, like I say, it was a Capitals team that got, worked over too much. The Capitals, who had won their previous 5 games and 10 of 11. So, it is a bit unfortunate that the Capitals weren't able to keep the winning going. Ultimately, what it was about is inopportune turnovers at the wrong time. And I guess every turnover is a turnover at the wrong time. But, for the most part, the Capitals in the first period got next to no shots on net. It was the Ottawa Senators getting much more shots on net. And then in the second period is when the Capitals got all their scoring. The Capitals applied the pressure. They got some goals scored out there. But ultimately, it was the tenacity and the willpower of the Ottawa Senators to find a way to win the game. It was DeBrincat that was engaged, and it was just a team working together. It was Claude Giroux kind of proving his leadership skills out on the ice. And again, it was just ultimately, it was a Caps team that got worked over. The defeat also came just 2 days after one of their best 60-minute efforts of the season, a 4-0 shutout of the Rangers. And, the Capitals were hoping to build on that winning as they were going forward, because that win against the Rangers was a statement win. Make no mistake about it. The Capitals, who had struggled all season long with stringing together wins, were able to find a way to pick up a big win against the New York Rangers. And, like I say, they were hoping to get that going forward, but ultimately it was not meant to be. We got a little bit away from where we've been having such a good month here. Darcy Kemper said, Peter Laviolette said, they were the better team tonight from the start to the end. He said, so lesson to be learned for us is that we can't come out that way. The Caps were outshot 16-4 in the first period and 45-23 for the game. The Caps could have still won the game. They just got outworked. And, when you were watching the game, especially the first, I would say the second period, most notably, it seemed like when you were watching the game that the Caps were actually going to win the game. They were getting the great scoring. They had the great goal by Ovechkin. They had one out there by Strome. They had one by Kuznetsov. Just really great goals out there. But ultimately, it was the costly turnovers. And I'm going to say something that we've heard all season. It was not playing a 60-minute hockey game. That's what the Capitals did not do against the Senators. They did not play a full game And ultimately, if you're going to end up winning games, you have to go out and play a complete game. I know that's nothing novel or new to say, but that's what you have to do if you want to win games. You can't have those costly turnovers. And, a team like the Ottawa Senators, they're going to make you pay. They are, by and large, a young and upcoming team. I know there are some veterans on the team. There's DeBrincat out there. There's Claude Giroux, among some other ones. But ultimately, that is a team on the rise. That is a team that has stockpiled draft picks. It's a team that has made some, great trades over the last couple seasons. So I think that is a team that is going to be coming into their own within the seasons to come here. Trevor Van Riemsdyk got picked off by Claude Giroux, who fed to Stützle, and the Sens scored. That was the first one, and the wheels fell off in the final part of the second and third period. Kuzi got picked off by DeBrincat and led to one of his goals of the night. On the goal, Kuznetsov says, "It was my mistake, but only dead people don't make mistakes, right?" Unfortunately, that's how it is. I take responsibility for sure. And when you watch the game out there and DeBrincat got the game winner, the look on Kuznetsov's face was like, really, did that just really happen right now? And that's the way it is. You make costly errors, you're going to end up paying. And that's what happened. The Senators, they outworked the Capitals for a line share of the game, and that's why they won. And then overtime, Kuzi smashes into Orlov and fell. Then it was Giroux to DeBrincat for the overtime game winner. And it went, the thing of it is the Capitals had the lead in the second, and all they had to do really was kind of batten down the hatches, and they would have won that game. But it was the costly turnovers. They came out strong. Ovechkin continued referring to the first period. They have more hits than us, more shots, obviously, but it was 0-0. In the second, we control the game most of the time, but in the third, we just have one chance. Gustafsson, Sheary, and Ovi scored goals for the Caps. And just a really breakout season for Gustafsson, and we'll talk about him a little bit later. On the night, Dylan Strome said, "Been a while since I scored a goal, so it felt good." And Dylan Strome was one of those positive acquisitions that was made in the offseason to fill the void in Nick Backstrom's absence, and he has done a great job out there. The questions kind of remain is where will he be next season? He's on a one-way deal with the Capitals. Will they bring him back? And where will he fit in? I guess, I guess it remains to be seen what players they sign, what players come back. But, if you're asking me, I think that Dylan Strome would be a really great addition for years to come. But just taking a look at this Capitals team, I know it's easy to kind of get down in the dumps when they lose even one game. But if you want to take a look at things and kind of widen the lens here a little bit, just remember how poor the Capitals were playing last month and the month before that, and contrast that to how they're playing this month. The Capitals are 10-2 in the month of December. So that is just something to consider about their great play. And even though they lost a game that they should have won, it's important not to lose sight of the important things. All right, so after the break here, we will talk about the breakout season so far for Erik Gustafsson. We'll talk about that next. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes too many as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out. You think of calling for a ride, but nah, you live nearby. You can make it home. You're okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst thing that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen today. Make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories around the sports world in 20 minutes or less, plus instant reactions, game recaps, and Locked On's Take of the Day. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcasts. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this next segment, we are going to talk about the breakout season of Erik Gustafsson on this team. He was a player that was brought in on a one-year deal to kind of see what the Capitals have out there. The interesting position for the Capitals right now is that John Karlsson is the only player on the blue line under contract after this season. It puts him in a bit of an interesting position. Feherevary and Alexeyev are restricted free agents, but as far as free agents are concerned overall, they're all going to be free agents except for John Karlsson. So it's going to be an interesting thing for the Capitals and Erik Gustafsson. Are they going to re-sign him to a new deal? I guess it remains to be seen if they're going to be able to do that. If he continues to play the way he's been playing, his price is obviously going to go up, 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 right? So if he keeps playing well, they're going to have to pay him more money. So it puts the Capitals in a bit of an interesting position because this team is facing a rebuild at some point, as we know that there's not going to be any earth-shaking changes made as long as Alex Ovechkin is playing here. There were promises made to him by ownership and Brian McClellan that there's not going to be a tear it down to the studs rebuild while he is still here. But that doesn't mean that they're going to sign, someone like Dmitry Orlov to a long deal if they're going to do a rebuild in a few years anyway. It's just going to be interesting. And I think that ultimately it's going to be about which player plays the best ultimately, because that's who you want to have on your team. And Erik Gustafsson has done that. Erik Gustafsson recorded an assist on Thursday against the Ottawa Senators, extending his point streak to 6 games. Gustafsson's current point streak is the second longest of his career and is just 2 shy of his career-long 8-game point streak accomplished by the Blackhawks from December 27th, 2018 to January 12th, 2019. Gustafsson's streak began on December 17th versus Toronto when he recorded his first career hat trick in the Capitals' 5-2 win. Only San Jose's Erik Karlsson has more points among NHL defensemen since December 17th. And it was one of those interesting moves when they brought Gustafsson into this team, as he is a bit of a journeyman. He's played on several different teams, and people were wondering, where is he going to fit in on this team? He's kind of bounced around to some different teams. How well is he going to play with the Capitals? Because they need that steady force on the blue line. And as it turns out, Erik Gustafsson has done a great job doing that. And to get a hat trick for a guy that's a defenseman on the blue line is not something that happens every single day. So kind of just an interesting thing out there for him to do that. He went the whole game or the whole season so far without having a single goal. Then he gets 3 goals in one night. So he's up to 3 goals. He gets a goal the game after that. He's up to 4 goals in 2 games. The big thing for me is with Erik Gustafsson is, can he maintain? Can he keep scoring those consistent goals game after game after game? That's ultimately what they're going to be looking for out of him. So Gustafsson has recorded 20 points in 37 games this season, which ranks tied for 6th on Washington and 2nd among Capital Blue Liners. Gustafsson recorded his 3rd multi-point performance in 5 games on Tuesday against New York Rangers, giving him 19 points on the season and surpassing his total from 21-22 in 23 fewer games. This season, Gustafsson has recorded 54.0 shot attempt percentage at a 5-on-5 shot attempts, 563 attempts against, which is the 2nd highest rate on the team. In addition, Gustafsson's +13 plus-minus rating in December leads the NHL. So this player that they went out and signed kind of on a prove me deal is kind of proving his worth on this team. Like I talked about, this Capitals team is facing, some uncertainty, shall we say, in the future on the blue line. So if they can start to kind of assess and determine which players are worth coming back, then I think that helps, because I think, if Erik Gustafsson can maintain that production throughout the entire season, like I talked about, his value is going to go up. So as long as the Caps can sign him under their budget, then I think they would be wise to bring him back. They have John Karlsson under contract, and then they're going to have to start to assess what other blue liners that they want to have come back. You have Orlov out there and Jensen and Van Riemsdyk and Irwin. And which of those players on the blue line are you going to want to have come back? Obviously, they're not all going to be able to come back. But if you can continue to get production from a player like Gustafsson out there, I think they would be wise to get him to come back to the team because he is stepping up and doing something similar to what John Karlsson does. And if you listen to Peter Laviolette talk, they're talking about that, um, someone like Erik Gustafsson on this team and someone like John Karlsson, they're not a dime a dozen. So it is going to be interesting to see who they choose to go with. Of course, there's Martin Feherevary out there as well. So they do have a lot of interesting questions to answer. Erik Gustafsson's 6-point streak is the longest by a Capitals defenseman not named John Karlsson since Dennis Weidman had a 7-game streak in October 2011. Karlsson has done it 7 times, writes Matt Wyrick. So, those are quite glowing stats for Erik Gustafsson, a player that, was a sound defenseman, but didn't really show up on the score sheet as far as goal scoring is concerned. But now he's really starting to light it up. And that's what the Capitals need at this point, because we know that there's a myriad of injuries on this team. So to have someone that is a bright spot on this team that's getting production, that's a sound defenseman and can score goals, those are excellent things going forward. That is what the Capitals are hoping for Gustafsson. That's what they're hoping for the rest of the blue line, because John Karlsson, when he's healthy and in the lineup, he eats up a lot of minutes. So that's what the Caps need. They need someone to fill that void. And I think it's going to have to be something that's done by committee. I don't think that there is. In fact, I know there's not someone on the Caps right now that is an apples for apples comparison as far as what Karlsson is able to do, to play a lot of minutes, to play sound defensively, and to contribute on offense. So Gustafsson doing that, and continued production from other guys on the blue line, I think is going to be very important. All right, so after the break here, we are going to talk about Martin Feherevary as he is getting closer to his return, and then we will talk about the Caps' next game against the Montreal Canadiens. We'll talk about that next. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. In this next segment here, we are going to talk about Martin Feherevary, one of the Capitals players that has worked his way up through Hershey and has maintained a role on the team. It's one of the things about the Caps is they are not in the green banana business. They want a winner right now. They don't really have patience for, a future talent. They want someone that's going to play well. And Martin Feherevary is, like I say, one of the few players that comes to mind in recent memory that has worked his way up through the system and has maintained a role on this team and is still an active player. I know that there's Chandler Stevenson and some other players that have worked their way up, but they're no longer on the Caps. Before Martin Feherevary, it's pretty much like Tom Wilson and Braden Holtby come to mind. So like I said, the Caps oftentimes don't promote players up through Hershey and have them maintain roles on this team. They either get sent back down to Hershey or they move them out somewhere else. So it's good to see that some of that talent that's being produced and nurtured down in Hershey is actually paying off, and they're getting their opportunity out there. But because of that, the Capitals have loaned defenseman Lucas Johansson back to Hershey, paving the way for them to activate Martin Feherevary from the injured reserve. So all signs point to that Martin should be back in the next game against the Canadiens. And I guess it's going to be interesting to see how well he performs. He has been missing for some time. That also means that, like I say, Lucas Johansson got sent back to Hershey, and Alexiev is expected to be the 7th defenseman. So these young players that have stepped up on the blue line, They played while there's a position available, and now that some of these players are coming back, they are getting sent down to Hershey, or they are turning into depth players on the big team. But in any event, I do think that there's going to be a spot for them on the team in years to come. It's just them having to bide their time. Feherevary has missed the last 12 games with an upper body injury he suffered back on December 3rd against the Calgary Flames following a hard hit along the boards by Milan Lucic. Through 26 games this year, the 23-year-old has 2 goals and 2 assists, with both of those coming over the last 3 games he played. And one of the things about Martin Feherevary is that towards the end, I don't know if it's still true now, but he led the team in hits. So he is kind of brings a lot to the table. He brings the physical game, plus he's a sound defenseman. So to have Martin Feherevary back in the lineup, solidifying that blue line is just a really good position for the Capitals to be in. So you got Erik Gustafsson firing on all cylinders, and you have Martin Feherevary that we hope is going to come back how he was playing before. And I think the Caps are going to be in a good position. What I've talked about in this show is what's really kind of exciting for me as a Caps fan is we know how well the Caps are playing right now, save the last game, of course. But in general, through the month of December, they have been playing very well. Just consider how great this team will be once Tom Wilson comes back, once Nick Backstrom comes back, once TJ Oshie comes back. It would only stand to reason that this team is going to be playing that much better. And as I take a look at the standings here right now in the Metro Division, the Capitals are in 3rd place in the Metro. And, just I would say like about 3 or 4 weeks ago, they were much lower down in the standings. So they are slowly edging their way up and up the standings. I think sky's the limit ahead of them. So Washington has 45 points, New Jersey 46, and Carolina 52. Carolina is going to be a tough team to catch as they are playing very well. Their record is 23-6-6. The Capitals are 20-13-5. I'm not saying it's impossible. The Capitals could continue to catch fire, and the Carolina Hurricanes could have a bunch of injuries on the team, or they could start playing poor. I do think that it is still a possibility that the Capitals could be in first place. I know it's a bit of a stretch, but isn't it funny? It's funny to me anyway that we were talking about for the longest time that this team is going to be lucky to be a wild card team. They're going to be lucky to do anything this season, and everyone around the league, from the NHL Network to the TSN and whoever up in Canada there as well, they all kind of pan this team saying, well, they're a geriatric old team. They don't have what it takes. It's an old lineup. Well, I think the Capitals are proving a lot of different NHL insiders wrong and that they don't know everything, because who did they peg to be the top in the Metro? They picked it to be Carolina and New York, the New York Rangers, that is. And Carolina is, in fact, in the top, but the Rangers sit in 6th place with 44 points. So things don't necessarily always go according to script, and something crazy could happen, and the Rangers could, in fact, be in first place when it's all said and done. Highly unlikely, but the Capitals have proved anything is possible here. But just a really positive sign for me as a Capitals fan, and I hope you guys feel positive about it as well. The Caps, as I look at this right now, 3rd place in the Metro Division. Just really great. So the Capitals' next opponent is the Montreal Canadiens. And, I don't want to get involved in what they call a trap game. And what do I mean by a trap game is when you play a team and you think they played so poorly that there is, we're going to mop the floor with those guys. The Montreal Canadiens sit in 8th place in the Atlantic. Their record is 15-18-3 with 33 points. The Boston Bruins, who lead the Atlantic, have 59 points and are 28-4-3. So on paper, it does appear that this should be an easier game. The Canadians do have something that they want to prove as well. If we take a look At their last game, they got beaten quite severely by the Florida Panthers by a score of 7-2. The game before that, they lost to the Lightning by a score of 4-1. The game before that, they lost 4-2 to the Dallas Stars. So they are on a losing streak, suffices to say. So it does look like the Caps are in a good position. Let's hope they can pick up a big W and they can keep this momentum going forward, because, I know that they're sitting well right now, and I know that they're sitting in third place, but I'm not going to be totally satisfied until they sit on the top of the Metro Division. I do think it's possible. It may take some time. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen today. Now make Locked On Sports Today your second listen. Peter Bukowski brings you the biggest stories from around the sports world in 20 minutes. Get the analysis and opinions before anyone else with our local and national experts and insiders. Locked On Sports Today, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcast. So once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, where it's your team every day. My name is Dan Holney, and I'll talk to you again next time.